Amelia sat on the worn-out porch of her childhood home, the quiet of the small town surrounding her like a blanket. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the hills, but Amelia's mind was far from peaceful. She had always dreamed of something bigger than the simple life that everyone around her seemed content with. She wanted to write stories, to create worlds with her words, to make people feel things they had never felt before. But this dream felt out of reach, like a distant star in the sky that she could never quite touch. Her parents, hard-working and practical, had always encouraged her to focus on stable careers. A job in a hospital, a teaching position, something safe, something secure, they would say. They had never understood her passion for writing. "You can't make a living off of daydreams, Amelia," her father often reminded her. But Amelia could feel the pull of her dreams, stronger than any voice of doubt. It was on one ordinary evening, as she finished reading a novel that she had borrowed from the town library, that something shifted. The words on the page spoke to her in a way she hadn't expected. It wasn't just the plot or the characters, it was the way the author had used language, the way each sentence carried so much weight, so much emotion. Amelia closed the book and stared out the window, feeling an overwhelming sense of purpose. "I can do this," she whispered to herself. "I can write. And I will." The next morning, without telling anyone, she packed her bags and left a note for her parents. She was heading to the big city to chase her dreams. It wasn't easy. The journey was long, and the city felt overwhelming when she first arrived. The streets were always busy, the noise never stopped, and Amelia wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. But there was no turning back now. She had taken the first step, and she knew there was no other choice but to keep going. Amelia found a small apartment in a quiet corner of the city. It wasn't much, just a room with a bed, a desk, and a tiny kitchen. But it was hers, and it symbolized freedom. Every morning, she walked through the busy streets, watching people rush to work, oblivious to the dreamer wandering among them. Amelia enrolled in writing courses and began attending local writers' groups, eager to find a community that shared her passion. She spent hours in the city's libraries, absorbing everything she could about writing techniques, storytelling, and the art of crafting compelling characters, but the city wasn't as welcoming as Amelia had hoped. The rejections started to pile up. She sent her stories to magazines and publishers, only to receive polite thank you, but no thank you letters in return. Each rejection stung, and there were times when she felt like giving up. She wasn't sure if she was just wasting her time, if maybe this dream wasn't meant for her after all. But deep down, she knew there was no going back. One evening, after a particularly harsh rejection, Amelia sat by her window, feeling the weight of failure pressing down on her. Her phone buzzed with a message from her friend Sarah, a fellow writer. "Don't give up, Amelia," Sarah's message read. "The road may be hard, but the view from the top is worth it." Amelia smiled, wiping away a tear, and opened her laptop. She began writing again, pouring her heart into the story, determined to keep pushing forward, no matter how many doors were slammed in her face. After months of writing, revising, and submitting her work, Amelia's persistence finally paid off. One morning, as she sipped her coffee, she received an email that would change her life. A publishing house had read one of her short stories and wanted to publish it. Amelia could hardly believe it. The dream she had held onto so tightly for so long was finally becoming a reality. Her heart raced as she read through the email again, double-checking to make sure she hadn't misread it. Amelia immediately called Sarah, her voice trembling with excitement. "They want to publish my story, Sarah. They actually want to publish it." Sarah's voice was filled with joy as she congratulated Amelia. "I knew you could do it. This is just the beginning." As Amelia signed her first publishing contract, she felt a rush of emotions, pride, relief, and a deep sense of accomplishment. She had worked so hard for this moment, and it had finally come. But she also knew that this was only the beginning. There was still much to do, still many stories to write and share with the world. Amelia's first book was published, but the world didn't immediately take notice. She had imagined the launch to be a grand affair, with readers lining up to get her autograph, glowing reviews flooding in, and her name on every bestseller list. But reality was far different. The book sold slowly at first, and the reviews that did come in were mixed. Some praised her writing, but others criticized her pacing, her characters, and her storytelling choices. For a while, Amelia questioned herself. Was she truly meant to be a writer? Had she been lucky with her first publication, or was it all just a fluke? The pressure to succeed weighed heavily on her, and she found herself struggling with self-doubt more than ever. But this time, she didn't give up. Instead, she leaned into the discomfort and used it to fuel her growth. She spent hours revising her second manuscript, learning from the feedback she had received and finding new ways to challenge herself creatively. Amelia began to write for herself, not for the approval of others. She focused on the stories that mattered to her, rather than trying to fit into any mold. Slowly, her audience began to grow. Readers who connected with her work reached out, telling her how much her stories had impacted them. One evening, as Amelia sat in her apartment, watching a new review of her second book pop up online, she smiled. It was a glowing review from a major literary magazine. Her heart soared as she realized that she had done it not for the recognition, but for the sheer joy of writing. She had found her place in the world, and the journey had made every moment worth it. Years passed, and Amelia's career as a writer continued to flourish. She had published several books, each one more successful than the last. Her stories had touched thousands of people, and she had built a loyal readership. But more than the accolades, the book signings, and the glowing reviews, Amelia had come to understand something more important: the value of the journey itself. Standing at a podium at a literary awards ceremony, Amelia looked out over the sea of faces, each one filled with admiration. But as she prepared to give her acceptance speech, her mind drifted back to that small town porch, to the girl who had dared to dream. She thought about all the obstacles she had faced, the doubts that had almost consumed her, and the quiet voice inside that had never stopped urging her to keep going. Amelia realized that success wasn't about fame or recognition, it was about staying true to herself, no matter how difficult the road might have been. She had made it not because of the awards or the bestseller lists, but because she had never given up on her dream. As she stepped off the stage, the applause still ringing in her ears, Amelia knew that the true reward of her journey was the person she had become. She had chased her dreams, and in doing so, had found a sense of peace and fulfillment that no amount of recognition could ever replace. Amelia had reached a point in her career where the accolades were frequent, and the praise was endless. But behind the scenes, the pressure was beginning to take its toll. She was expected to churn out books at a rate faster than ever before, and with each new release, the stakes seemed higher. What had started as a joyful passion had now become a job that consumed her thoughts, her time, and her energy. She no longer had the same spark when sitting down to write. The creative flow that had once come so naturally now felt forced, like a well that had been emptied too many times. Amelia spent long nights staring at the blank page, wondering if she had anything left to say. One evening, after finishing a draft of her latest book, Amelia felt drained. The words on the page didn't sing like they used to. They felt flat, tired. She closed her laptop and looked out the window, the city lights stretching far into the horizon. What happened to the fire inside me, she wondered. It was as if she had become a machine, churning out stories that no longer felt like her own. As the days passed, Amelia started to feel disconnected from her passion. She began to wonder if this was all worth it, if the endless cycle of deadlines and expectations had stolen the very thing she had loved about writing in the first place. Chapter 7. Rediscovering the spark. Amelia knew she couldn't continue down this path. She had to find her way back to the spark that had once driven her. But how? She couldn't remember the last time she had written just for herself. The pressure to succeed had overshadowed her love for storytelling, and it was time to change that. One afternoon, she decided to take a break. She closed her laptop, walked away from her desk, and stepped outside. She wandered through the city, not with the intention of finding inspiration for her next book, but simply to clear her mind. The bustling streets, the rhythm of life all around her, reminded her that she was part of something much larger than her own struggles. As she walked, she stumbled upon a small, quiet park she had never noticed before. The soft rustling of leaves and the distant sound of children laughing brought a sense of calm over her. She sat on a bench and closed her eyes, breathing deeply. In that moment of stillness, Amelia remembered why she started writing in the first place: to connect with others, to make them feel something real. The pressure to succeed had clouded that simple truth. She realized that she needed to return to her roots, to write stories that moved her, regardless of whether they were commercially successful. Amelia spent the next few weeks in a period of creative rebirth. She didn't write with the intention of publishing a bestseller or pleasing her readers. She wrote for herself, stories that came from her heart, with no pressure to conform to the expectations of the world. She spent hours each day writing, rediscovering the joy that had first led her to the world of words. The new stories were different. They were rawer, more vulnerable. They weren't crafted to fit a mold, but to express her emotions and thoughts in their purest form. She wrote about the struggles she had faced, the doubts that had once consumed her, and the hope that had always pushed her forward. Amelia poured herself into every word, knowing that this time, she was writing for the right reasons. After completing the first draft of her new book, Amelia took a deep breath and smiled. It was the best work she had done in years, and it felt like she had rediscovered a part of herself that had been lost for so long. Amelia knew that her new book wasn't like her previous ones. It was different, it was more personal, more vulnerable. She wasn't sure how the public would respond, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't care. She had written something that felt true to her, and that was all that mattered. After much deliberation, she decided to take the leap and submit the manuscript to her publisher. The waiting period felt excruciating. She had poured her heart into this story, and now it was out of her hands. Would they accept it? Would they understand what she was trying to say? One afternoon, just as Amelia was beginning to lose hope, she received an email. Her publisher had read the manuscript, and they loved it. They believed in the story, and they wanted to publish it as her next book. The tears that had once been a symbol of her frustration and doubt now became tears of joy. She had made it, she had rediscovered the joy of writing, and in doing so, had created a book that truly represented who she was. As Amelia's new book hit the shelves, something incredible happened. Readers connected with it in a way she hadn't expected. The raw honesty, the vulnerability, and the authenticity of her words resonated with people who had faced their own struggles and doubts. The book became a bestseller, not because it followed a trend or conformed to any expectation, but because it was real. Readers shared their stories with Amelia, telling her how her words had given them the strength to keep going in their own lives. It was more than just a success, it was a movement. Amelia had finally learned that success wasn't about fitting into the mold or meeting deadlines. It was about staying true to yourself and your passion, even when the world around you was pulling you in different directions. Looking out at the crowd at her book launch event, Amelia realized that the journey was never about fame or recognition. It was about the people she had touched along the way, the lives she had changed with her words. And in that moment, she understood that the dream she had chased for so long wasn't just about writing, it was about connecting with others, and in doing so, finding her own peace. The success of her book brought Amelia new opportunities. Invitations for interviews, speaking engagements, and book signings flooded in. But amidst all the excitement, Amelia started to feel a pull, something she hadn't anticipated. While she was grateful for the recognition, she noticed a subtle shift in herself. The public persona she had created, the confident, successful author, was becoming a mask that she wore every day. Behind it, the person she had rediscovered was still there, but she hadn't yet fully embraced the changes within herself. It wasn't until one quiet evening, when she was alone in her apartment, that the weight of it all hit her. Amelia looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. The woman staring back at her was no longer the anxious, struggling writer who had started this journey, but neither was she the confident, fearless author everyone now admired. She was somewhere in between, still figuring out who she was becoming. It was then that Amelia made a choice. She would stop hiding behind the persona of success and embrace the vulnerability that had made her book so special. She would continue to write, not for the applause, but for the process itself. For the discovery of self, for the healing of others, and for the truth in every story she told. As Amelia leaned into this new chapter of her life, she found herself facing a crossroads. The pressure to write another bestseller loomed large, but Amelia realized that what truly mattered was the impact her work had on people, not the number of copies sold. She took a step back from the noise and focused on her craft. Amelia started to experiment with new genres, new styles, and even new forms of writing. She wrote poetry, short stories, and even started a blog where she shared her thoughts on life, creativity, and mental health. The world of writing had become her canvas once again, and she embraced the freedom to explore without fear of judgment. Her readers followed her on this new journey, supporting her as she explored new territories in her writing. Amelia had found her voice, and she was using it to express herself fully and authentically. With each new project, Amelia's writing grew bolder. She no longer feared the judgment of others, and in turn, her words became more powerful. She was no longer just writing stories, she was sharing pieces of herself, exposing her own fears, triumphs, and lessons learned along the way. One of her most impactful works came in the form of a deeply personal essay about mental health. Amelia had struggled with anxiety and depression for much of her life, and writing about it allowed her to confront the emotions she had long kept hidden. It was an incredibly vulnerable piece, one that many of her readers connected with deeply. The essay went viral, sparking conversations about mental health and the importance of speaking out about it. Amelia realized that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. By sharing her struggles, she had given others the courage to do the same. Her writing had become a platform for healing, and Amelia embraced the power that came with that. As Amelia continued on her journey, she started to understand that success wasn't about accolades or recognition. It was about following her heart. Even when the path wasn't clear, she took time to travel, to meet new people, and to immerse herself in different cultures and experiences. She no longer worried about meeting deadlines or writing for a specific audience. Instead, she wrote for herself, letting her adventures and emotions guide her words. Along the way, Amelia met others who were on similar journeys of self-discovery. She formed deep connections with writers, artists, and creators who shared her belief in the power of authenticity. Together, they created a community of support and encouragement, reminding each other that the road to success was never a straight line. Years passed, and Amelia's writing career continued to flourish. But as she looked back on everything she had achieved, she realized that the true success had nothing to do with the number of books she sold or the awards she received. It was about the lives she had touched, the stories she had shared, and the person she had become along the way. Amelia had come full circle. The young writer who had once struggled with self-doubt had found her place in the world, not because she had followed the prescribed path, but because she had paved her own. Her journey wasn't about perfection or constant success. It was about embracing the ups and downs, the failures and victories, and continuing to evolve. And in the end, that was the greatest gift she could give herself and her readers. As she sat down to write her next book, Amelia smiled. She had finally found her voice, and in doing so, had found her peace. As Amelia sat in the quiet of her writing space, the sounds of the city just outside her window, she realized something profound. She had become the author she always dreamed of being. Not because of the fame, not because of the wealth, but because her stories were genuine, raw, and real. Her voice, once muffled by the fear of judgment, now echoed across the pages of her books, resonating with countless readers who found pieces of themselves in her words. It was here, in this moment of reflection, that she understood writing wasn't about achieving perfection. It was about honesty. About being willing to show up with all of your flaws and fears and still write, still create. Amelia had found her rhythm, and it was as if the world had conspired to bring her exactly where she needed to be. And now, with each story, she was ready to share even more of herself, knowing that in doing so, she would help others heal, grow, and perhaps even find their own voices. The success of her previous work had opened doors she never imagined. With newfound confidence, Amelia accepted an invitation to speak at a literary conference. She had once been terrified of public speaking, but now she stood before hundreds of aspiring writers, sharing her story of struggle, growth, and the power of vulnerability. Her speech was raw, honest, and empowering. She told the audience how she had nearly given up on her dream of writing, how she had fought through self-doubt and fear of failure. She spoke of the moments when she felt invisible, like her voice would never be heard. But through it all, she persisted. As she looked out at the faces of the crowd, some hopeful, some nervous, some waiting for the next step in their own journey, Amelia realized that her story wasn't just her own. It was the story of countless others who had faced the same battles. She left the stage with a sense of purpose that she had never felt before. Her next book would be her most personal yet, exploring the themes of identity, transformation, and the search for meaning. As Amelia began working on her new book, she faced a challenge she hadn't anticipated. The words didn't come as easily as before. For the first time in years, she felt lost in the process. Her mind wandered, and her pen hovered over the page with hesitation. She wasn't sure what had changed. Perhaps it was the pressure of expectations, both from herself and from her readers. Or perhaps it was the fear that, after all this time, she might have run out of things to say. During this time of creative struggle, Amelia turned to her journal. Writing freely, without the pressure of deadlines or expectations, allowed her to reconnect with the simple joy of expression. She wrote about everything, the mundane moments of everyday life, the beauty in the small things, and the deep emotions she often kept hidden. It was in this quiet space of reflection that she rediscovered her love for writing. Amelia realized that creativity didn't have to be forced. It came from within, from the stillness of the mind and the willingness to embrace uncertainty with renewed clarity. Amelia took a bold step. She left behind the genre she had built her career on and decided to write something entirely different. This book would not be a novel, but a collection of essays on personal growth, resilience, and the power of storytelling. The transition was difficult at first. She was used to crafting elaborate plots and characters, not diving into her own experiences. But as she began to write, the words flowed with ease. Each essay became a reflection of her journey, of the lessons she had learned, and the wisdom she had gained through years of overcoming obstacles. In one essay, Amelia explored the idea of failure not as something to be feared, but as a stepping stone toward growth. She wrote about her own failures, the times when she felt defeated, and how each setback had shaped her into the person she was today. As she worked on the collection, Amelia felt a sense of liberation. She was no longer confined by expectations or labels. She was writing not for the approval of others, but for her own healing and growth. The release of Amelia's new book was met with an outpouring of support. Readers shared how the essays had touched their hearts, how they had found solace in Amelia's words. The stories of vulnerability, resilience, and authenticity resonated deeply with people from all walks of life. Amelia realized that her true purpose as a writer was not to entertain, but to connect. Her words had the power to bridge gaps, to bring people together, and to spark meaningful conversations about the things that truly mattered. In the years that followed, Amelia continued to write, but she no longer felt the pressure of creating something for the sake of success. She wrote because it was her way of communicating, of sharing her heart with the world. And as long as she was able to do that, she would continue to write. Her journey was far from over. Each new chapter brought fresh lessons, new perspectives, and more opportunities to connect with others. Amelia's story, like all stories, was ever evolving. And in the act of writing, she had found her purpose, her voice. Amelia's journey was never about achieving fame or recognition. It was about finding her voice and sharing her truth. With each story she told, she not only connected with others but also grew closer to the person she was meant to be. And as long as she continued to write, she knew her purpose would remain clear: to inspire, to heal, and to connect.